a tumultuous few weeks. Most recently, we have devoted our thoughts and prayers to Israel, and we're also recovering from the upheaval that occurred closer to home in the tri-state area. By the time Shabbat arrived, after Hurricane Sandy, many synagogues were still left without heat and electricity. Some still even had flooded basements. It was cold and it was dark. But people still came in droves to pray Friday night services. They came bundled in their winter jackets, even though it was so cold in the building. They came to pray by candlelight, even though they could hardly see the words. We had never been struck by a hurricane like this, and it left us feeling vulnerable and afraid. It reminds me of the night after 9/11. My small synagogue on Long Island didn't always have a minyan on weeknights, but that evening, after the Twin Towers fell, hundreds of people poured into the synagogue to daven Mariv. And all throughout the service, people would whisper to each other, asking, "Have you heard from your loved ones or other people in the community?" The room buzzed with questions and answers like this all throughout the night. We sang loudest when it came to the Shema, the ancient words from the book of Deuteronomy, where the community sang the Kol Echad in one voice to God. But during the silent Amidah, the time for personal conversation with God, the room was eerily quiet. You could see people praying with a type of concentration that they've never had throughout the rest of the year. And when I left after services that night, the reality outside was the same. It was terrible. But somehow, I felt less isolated. And this experience left me thinking about the power of prayer in the face of trauma, when your sense of security has been shattered. In this week's Parashat Vayetzei, Jacob demonstrates that power of prayer. He leaves behind some tense family relationships and he heads towards Haran. Now we know Jacob's family life was a little bit different. He had a complicated web of deceit, of favoritism, and of fractured identity. And he packs his bags, he heads out, and along the journey, Jacob comes and stops in an unnamed place and encounters God in unexpected ways. Vayifga b'makom, and Jacob comes upon the place, Vayalan sham, and he takes a nap. He sleeps there. This is the site where Jacob dreams his famous dream of angels ascending and descending a ladder that reaches from the ground to the sky. Some say that this ladder is a metaphor for Jacob himself, who is grounded on this earth, but as we will see, also reaches towards the heavens. Now, there are two major traditions that are born out of the first simple phrase, Vayifga b'makom. Rashi, borrowing from a phrase in the book of Micah, teaches that Vayifga b'makom means he prays there. And in her book, Genesis, the beginning of desire, Dr. Aviva Zornberg points out that Jacob is the very first person to pray in the Bible at night. In the danger and uncertainty of darkness, Jacob responds with prayer. So, why didn't the text just say Vayipalel? And he prayed. Rashi says that it uses Vayifka to convey another meaning. According to that second tradition, the phrase Vayifka b'makom comes to teach that this place where Jacob prays is actually Mount Moriah. Rashi comments on the Gemara in Kuli 91b that tells us that the root of the word Vayifka means he hit upon the place, indicating that something came rushing at Jacob. And what came rushing? It was Mount Moriah. So the rabbis insist, even though they are many, many miles apart, that this place where Jacob prays and Mount Moriah, the location of the binding of Isaac, become the same. And I imagine Jacob, realizing that he can't walk any farther because it's too dark to see, he stops, not knowing where he stands, Vayifga b'makom, and he comes upon a place, and he is overwhelmed by the experiences on Mount Moriah, the intuition, the knowledge of the trauma of what happened in his family and in their relationship in this place. This place, Mount Moriah, is where Abraham almost ended the entire line, where Jacob's grandfather almost sacrificed Jacob's own father, and where God almost let this happen. If the angel had been just a little late, or if God had wanted the sacrifice to go through, then there would have been no Jacob. The trust that Isaac may have had in his father Abraham and in God is fractured in this place. And by holding these two interpretations, Rashi paints a picture of Jacob stopping in a place that saw the near destruction of his family. And what does Jacob do in response? He prays. Having felt that God was absent from his father's life, that God cannot be trusted, questioning even God's existence, Jacob nonetheless takes a chance and prays. He talks to God. And something miraculous happens. Jacob has an intense religious experience. He dreams and God speaks to him, assuring Jacob that God will be with him and will protect him all along his journey. And Jacob wakes up from his dream and says, "Achenish Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati." God is in this place, and I didn't know it. And I relate to Jacob's surprise at finding God in a place where I felt vulnerable and threatened. In 2009, a rabbinical student studying in Israel, I was standing at the Western Wall when I heard booing coming from the men's side and hissing coming from the women's side. I was praying with a group called Women of the Wall. It's a group of female activists who fight for the right to pray at the Western Wall in their fullest religious expression. People nearby were throwing chairs at us, and they wanted us gone, out of their holy space, and never, in my entire life, had I been silenced so severely, being told that my voice was unwelcomed, that they didn't want me here, that my identity was illegitimate. Rabbinic tradition teaches that the temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, senseless hatred. Standing there at the Western Wall that day, I can tell you that senseless hatred, sinat chinam, has been passed down from generation to generation. And I wanted to leave that place. But I was asked to lead the group of women in Hallel, a set of psalms that praises God. And let me tell you, this was the furthest thing from my mind. And so I stood at the wall, trembling, hand in hand with Natalie, a fellow rabbinical student in Jerusalem, and we sang Hallel with the support of 20 brave women behind us, and I was overcome by a feeling of God's presence. I was calm, and soon after I grew joyous. I had felt vulnerable at the Western Wall and lost track of God's place there. By praying with my community, with the words of my people, I transcended the fear and the pain of the moment. We each have moments of fear, trauma, and uncertainty. For many of us, they have happened just within the last few weeks. They come when we lose loved ones. They come when we feel unsafe and when our world is turned upside down. And in the darkness of our emotions, in the depths of our isolation, we can be like Jacob. Jacob, who shows us that reaching out in prayer can offer us both grounding and transcendence. Sometimes it is our natural inclination to flock to places of worship and speak the words of our ancestors and community. Sometimes we need someone to take our hand and ask us if we want to join. And for others, it might just be a matter of opening our mouths and beginning a conversation.